So Clara Barton would have a similar history of the United States during the Civil War, starting at the Battle of Antietam. And she started the American Red Cross. But Alexander II, realizing how poorly the Russians did, decided that he made this realization. British and French soldiers fought harder because they were, as I put in quotes, free. They were conscripted into the French army, but they felt free. They had, to them, they had a connection to France and Britain. That the peasants who were basically drafted into the Russian army and stayed there for life had no real connection into the army and society. And he began to realize we need some kind of reform to have regular people feel an important ownership of the country, AKA, what is that term for intense pride in your country? Nationalism. Yeah, nationalism. And thus he would set the need for reform, and 10 years later, they would finally end serfdom.
Partially.
Officially. They would still be bound to the land, but at least they're not called serfs anymore.
What are they called?
They were called peasants.
Is that any better? A little bit.
So the Treaty of Paris of 1856 basically demilitarized the Black Sea. And that would last, if I get my years right, about 20 months. Not even 20 months. So Russia.
I thought it would last for about 2 years.
Yeah, actually not bad. Actually not quite, less than that, but by the 1870s. And all the great powers, the major powers said, we will respect the Ottoman Empire. Basically, even though the Ottoman Empire was dying, it was barely holding on. It was almost in free fall. All of these great powers said it's our best interest to keep something here. It's better to have a weak Ottoman Empire here than Russia here, or the French, or the British, or whomever it might be. So they're going to prop them up until eventually they won't anymore. That's World War I.
I wonder how they would look back on it when they think of that. They said, let's respect them, and how they're fighting.
You see that a lot, though. It's amazing how people will just forget stuff, or just conveniently forget.
What's the picture of a turtle?
Well, naturally, that is Timothy. Timothy was a tortoise that was brought back from the Crimean War and lived in the London Zoo until 2007 or 2004. And so they believe Timothy was born approximately 1839 and lived until 2004. That's Timothy. And yes, they drilled a hole in Timothy's shell with help. My name is Timothy.
Is he even alive? That picture of him being alive?
Yes, that's Timothy alive.
Okay.
My guess is Timothy probably didn't move a lot. So.
How fast can he go?
And so, more unification. What we're going to get into is nationalism and unification. Here is the new Chancellor of Germany. I'm sorry, of Prussia, Otto von Bismarck, in a race for unification with Italy. And the problem is they're going off into the unknown of potential war. Yes.
Was he named after the donut? Bismarck's the donut.
No, he was named after this capital of North Dakota.
I see. I thought, and was the capital of North
Wait.
Dakota named after
Otto
no,
or
the donut's
Bismarck?
named after that.
Wait,
Obviously, both the donut and the capital were named after Garibaldi. So let's do Italy first. So Italian unification. So they have had back in 1830, 1848, and now there's Garibaldi. So these are the leaders. And we've already had King Victor Emmanuel of Sardinia. He'd be the first monarch of a unified Italy. Cavour, and they dubbed him the head. But he was the brains, he was the premier of Sardinia. He's the one who jumped into the Crimean War, thinking we will ally ourselves with the French. Garibaldi was the fiery revolutionary leader, thus the sword. Mazzini started young Italy. So this goes back to 1830. Try to announce a Republic of Italy in 1848, but would fail. Get this out? Good.
So there's the head, the sword, the heart, and then just
And just the king.
and then you got Victor. That's it.
So these, in many ways, were the founding fathers of Italy. You can imagine how Victor Emmanuel, once he became the king of Italy, would really try to push his prominence. The big, the palace in Italy, the king's palace is King Victor Emmanuel's palace. It's Victor Emmanuel. But Mazzini and Garibaldi, in many ways, are the most romantic heroes. Or not so much, but he was behind the scenes. And Pope Pius IX was always a big issue. The Pope wanted to keep what was left of the Papal States. So the spoiler is he could go either way. The spoiler, he could spoil it for those who want unification or those who don't. And you'll notice one of the first photographs of him. He was the one who fled back in 1848. And so he's playing a double game. He knows the French in Sardinia, Piedmont are closer allies, but French soldiers are in the Papal States, keeping them on, or keeping the Papal States alive. And so all these foreign influences, the Austrians control northern Italy, much of northern Italy, where Venetia, all these areas right here, that's controlled by Austria. The French, as I mentioned before, in the Papal States. And this is a picture of Garibaldi fighting the French in Rome in 1849. He would be ousted by the French. And so the point is, there's all this foreign influence. And don't forget, you have the Kingdom of Two Sicilies and all that. Don't forget, though, Italy, there hasn't been a unified Italy since Rome. For a little bit, the Ostrogoths, but then that's about it in the 500s. So there's always, Italy's divided, and it's, Rome is crazy to somebody from, especially from a relatively small town in a place called Montana. Rome seems really crazy. But Naples is just like it's like going to a different country.
Is Rome where the Pope resided during this time?
Where the what?
Where the Pope is?
Yeah, the Pope's in Rome. Now the Pope has their own little tiny independent country called the Vatican within Rome. So the movement's going to be called the Resurgence or Risorgimento. Risorgimento.
Only Alex was here. He could help me pronounce it.
Yeah, you gotta do that. This is what I was told by somebody who's Italian. You can't say Italian, you just add a no. And then they were like, oh, you're trying.
Only Alex was here. He could tell us how to actually pronounce it. I don't know. He is.
So my nephew lives right here. I have a nephew who lives here. He's 8. Alex. I have a nephew too in Berlin. His name is Alec. You can't make that up. And a nephew in Spain. And his name is Michael. Okay. That would have been kind of cruel. His name is Alexander. No. So Sardinia Piedmont is going to lead this. Piedmont will lead this. So the first step, we've already talked about this before, the revolutions in 1848. This set the stage. They were not successful, but the seed was planted and it put Sardinia Piedmont in charge. They're the ones who fought the hardest for Italian unification. Now, let's be clear about it. I think Garibaldi and Mazzini wanted an Italian republic. Cavour wanted an Italian kingdom dominated by the monarch of Sardinia.
Was Cavour a noble with the front person?
Yeah, and he was a premier. They had a legislative body. They had a constitution, but it was not a democracy by any means. And so here's all the different states and kingdoms. Tuscany. I guess Umbria is really pretty.
I do like the name Kingdom of the Two Sicilies.
Yeah, that's always. When I first saw that map, it baffled me because Sicily's supposed to be an island, right?
Yeah, Sicily's supposed to be an island.
So next, Sardinia Piedmont sends troops to the Crimea. Why would they ever send a few thousand troops there? It made no sense. It's a relatively poor country, but it was purely for the French. It was to ally themselves with the French. Very much so. Because you want step 3? At Plombières in southern France, Cavour met with Napoleon after the Treaty of Paris was signed. And when Napoleon III and Cavour met, they basically decided, let's unify against Austria. France would send troops, and to get rid of Austrian influence. There's a long Austrian-French rivalry that went back before the 7 Years' War. And then don't forget all the Napoleonic Wars, one of the most.
Wait, which Napoleonic War? There's 3 of Napoleons.
The first Napoleonic Wars and the Revolution. Austria was almost always at war and defeated a number of times, but always at war with France and Napoleon. And so here's Napoleon and Cavour, and they decide to unify. And the whole agreement was a stronger position for France inside Europe, and then Sardinia would have some control over northern Italy. And so that was going to lead to the Austro-Sardinian War. And France jumped in. France sent troops basically under the idea, poor Sardinia is being attacked. When Sardinia provoked it.
Where is Sardinia on that?
Sardinia, here and here. This is actually was known as the Piedmont back then.
Oh, wait, so Sardinia is also an island, but also.
Yeah. So Sardinia is an island. So same thing as like the Kingdom of Two Sicilies.
Okay.
Uh-oh. Weird out. Give me a second. Quit recording.
Russians hacked your account.
Weird. So, in a battle in Lombardy, the French defeated the Austrians, and this would be a Sardinian victory. The French won. And the agreement, Sardinia got this. And France got a couple little pieces of Sardinia. It's like, all right, here's more land. Nice was a pretty prominent area in Savoy. This went to France. Still part of France to this day. That was bad. Next.
I think he died because of a bad joke I made.
They're watching us.
They're watching. Everyone act busy. How do we know if they're watching us?
I don't know. I don't even think.
Camera on the microphone. Come on, you can do it.
There we go.
Step 5. Garibaldi and his red shirts. They all wore these fiery red shirts. And this goes back to something that started in the 1830 revolution, where those who were fighting for more rights for the people started wearing red as the color of patriots. And it would soon be adopted by what's called the French Commune, which we'll get to tomorrow. And so they landed in Sicily, just a couple thousand men. And they landed, actually just 1,000 men. And more people rallied to their support, and they marched through Sicily, basically over all the monarch or the government officials all fled back to Naples, and they marched triumphantly into Naples and conquered it. Just kind of this popular uprising against the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. Partially to get rid of the decrepit monarchy, descendant of the Habsburgs, but also Italy. We will unify Italy together. And so they take the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. So that will lead to potentially all this area now under the control of Sardinia. And then the Austro-Prussian War. Austria and Prussia fought a really bloody war in what, Silesia, the name was not, right here. Fought a war right there. While Austria was losing this war, this allowed Sardinia to take the rest of Venetia. And once that happened, and Garibaldi joined this new Italian unified state, almost all of Italy is there. So step by step. The poor Austrians are being picked on by all sides. Yeah.
About Rome.
We're not there. We're not done. And then step 7, during the Franco-Prussian War, and the French are losing, they must withdraw their troops, and that allows this new unified Italy to march into Italy, and Italy is unified. By the way, you like my bullet points be the Italian flag? You like that?
That's actually pretty cool. How did you manage to do that?
I can't remember where I found it. I stole it from somebody and used it. That's kind of what you do everywhere. From somebody. And so that became Italy. Now they're not totally unified. Italy is still going to want a big piece of what was in Austria, and Italy still claims this area. That's going to be the reason they're going to enter World War I on the side of the Allies. For that, they think they'll get it. They don't get it all, and that'll lead to a lot of disillusionment and a guy named Mussolini. But that's another story. So here's there's still half the old Roman walls, and then redone in the 12th century, walls around Rome still existed. And so they basically rigged up a battle so they could act like they had to fight their way into Rome. And they shot a bunch of bullets into the gates and cannonballs, so it looked like there was a fight, and then took photographs of it to say, we've won the Battle of Rome, and they fled.
Who were they fighting?
Well, air. They beat the wall. And so that is a dramatic shot. I like these guys just firing at the wall.
The wall shall no longer harm us.
Thus we have a unified Italy. And the story of now, here's King Victor Emmanuel putting his foot into the entire boot of Italy. But they still called it Italia Irredenta because they didn't have it all. And the thing is, it's still going to be biblically different. Northern Italy will be more industrialized, more modernized, whatever that might mean. Southern Italy will be behind, considered second-class citizens. It's no coincidence that's where the mafia would begin, because they'd be considered to be kind of second-class citizens in Sicily. And Italy really would not feel like an independent Italy. So talking to people who lived there till like the 1970s, it seems so weird because I just think of Italy. We all just think of Italy, and it's different. And there's Cavour, Garibaldi, King Victor Emmanuel, all unifying Italy. And their flag. See the flag? The flag of Italy. You'll see this flag sometimes used in fascist Italy, and they kept it because fascist Italy was so technically a monarchy. But most of the time they would have the Roman fashion. So it's not the fascist flag. We're very clear about that. Yeah.
So when it said the right leg and the boot at last, was that kind of referring to the shape Italy was in? Kind of different shape.
Yeah, Italy looks like a boot, and a boot that I can say about in Canada. But be consistent. Consistent is always changed. Thus, to celebrate this, in 1871, 2 restaurants in Naples both claim that they were the first ones to do this. Yes. Yeah, the crown wouldn't come about to the 20th century. The first one didn't have a crown.
Pizza?
Pizza! For the new Italian flag. So there are 2 pizzerias in Naples that both claim to have invented it. And if you order a pizza there, that's what you get.
How was good mine to get pizza?
Huh?
Like the margarita pizza.
That's exactly what
Oh,
it
yeah,
is.
it is.
Yeah, that's what they call it here, but that would.
That's, yeah.
Do they still claim to have made pizza today?
Oh, yeah. So that's the pizza. The big hunks of mozzarella cheese, they just put big globs of it.
That's actually
And tomato sauce. And the other thing that's very interesting, they don't cut it.
So you have to start with the crust first.
Well, no, you get a knife and fork and you eat it.
Wow,
And then you rip off. So that was the pizza I got.
that's still pretty good.
Oh, it's so good. And that was a pizza my wife got.
Was the leaf in the middle always there?
That's basil. So there's this one that just one leaf. She had more basil on hers.
Huh.
I can't remember why. That seemed unfair. Yeah, everyone's out to get me. Yeah, that was,
Bring your own basil to it.
that was the time my wife and I walked through Naples. And we had to walk about a mile. Walking through town. And do you know what traffic laws are? Do you know? Like stop, go, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They don't know those.
So wait,
They're
what
just
happened?
hard winging all over. I mean, it's pretty scary.
Wait, do they have like any traffic lights?
Oh, sure, but no one cares. And there's this guy who's carrying a bag of groceries crossing the street.
Oh, no.
And this car bumped him. He fell down. I don't think he was hurt. But we're watching this. We're maybe 20 yards away, and everybody just started yelling at him for being on the street. And that's it. We're not crossing the street. We're going to stay on alleys. Naples was crazy,
So wait,
but it was all worth it because we got the pizza.
I just picture like it's a red light on the street with cyclones.
Yeah, it's Naples.
Is that Naples right there? Oh, no.
Okay, so let's get back to Napoleon III then. While this is going on, Napoleon III is kind of this benevolent emperor in France. And he had a plebiscite. We discussed this once before. A plebiscite is just a yes/no election.
Oh.
Yes or no. And basically, do you want him to be essentially emperor of France? Emperor of the French. Slightly different than empire of France. And of course he won. So basically they became an authoritarian state for a while.
Wait, can you go back to that?
Yeah. Kind of authoritarian. And then he would allow for a few more reforms. He was the law and order guy to crack down on all those barricades from 1848.
So instead of to the barricades, he said down on the barricades?
Essentially, well, we won't have this lawlessness again. So then after 1859, they became more of a liberal empire. Rights, but not quite. They still more following Code Napoleon. These uncles. But to this day, France, the country of liberty, fraternity, and equality, you don't have all the right. The people in France don't have all the rights you might have, let's say, in the United States. At least rights you think about. If you're arrested in France, they don't have the habeas corpus where they must have trial. They can just hold you. You don't want to be arrested. Okay, you don't want to be arrested anywhere,
I think you got arrested in France.
but you really don't want to get arrested in France. Okay, and in like Russia too, but that's another story.
What did
Now-
you do in France?
Huh?
Yeah, what were
What did you do in France?
France, they got a pretty.
Have a mustache.
Their police is they're out there. The French police is there. France is an interesting place.
Is it like a secret police or?
Oh, they have to say, well, of course, everyone has to see it. So there's economic reforms he began, and one of the biggies was to try to end tariff barriers. So what they're trying to do is he's trying to promote French industry. And so once again, he's a little bit older, but he's got the same mustache. We should do, I think that would be a great project.
So wait, will we get extra credit if we come to school with that mustache?
I think you graduate or not graduate based upon having that mustache. Some would argue that's unfair, and I would agree, but I don't make the rules. We love the rules.
Wait, didn't you say that most military positions were actually given to nobility?
At this time, but now in France, this is coming back. This is really going to hurt their army. Their military will be based on loyalty to Napoleon.
Oh, so it wouldn't really matter.
No, And you see this place like right now in Russia. Without a doubt, the Russian army is purely based upon loyalty to Putin. All right, that's supposed to say Paris.
Right, I didn't even read it though.
Oh, it's,
That was Paris, yeah, that was Paris.
Cares.
Paris.
what's the,
And
wait,
Double
what's
free trade?
double free trade.
wait, what's the capital of France again? Paris.
And secondary education. So for what we consider about grade 6 and above, the state is going to take over and make it kind of public education. So the French have a very good education system going into the 20th century. It's, let me rephrase it, it's gonna have the roots of it. Not everyone's gonna take advantage of it. The United States, even though there's problems with the US one, it will be much more widely available well into the 1970s. And they also finally made a deal with the church. It's going to be called the Syllabus of Errors, an agreement with Pope Pius IX, partially because he had troops in Rome. So Pope Pius IX was like, oh, I better sign this to make sure I keep at least a little bit of the papal states.
What exactly was this, treaty?
The Syllabus of Errors basically was a peace agreement between the Catholic Church and the French government. Because they had a lot of moral disagreements. The French government still owned most of it, or all the churches and the church land they had confiscated. So basically, the French government said, okay, we'll let you have certain,
We'll give you certain stuff back in exchange.
not even give it back, but allow them to use it. So if you go to any French church today, all these amazing cathedrals, and they still have Catholic priest or Catholic bishop or whatever it might be, but the French government owns it. It's like Notre Dame, the most famous, the French government still owns that.
Like Jesus, but, something else. In the French government.
Yeah, remember it's gonna be all Robespierre and the,
I thought it would be Marat at the back.
that'd be a good one. Moran would be kind of like the, oh, Robespierre did, yeah. And they kind of ended some of the censorship of the press. Not quite free press, but a little bit.
Like, what would they not censor?
Well, they allowed for maybe not full criticism of the French government.
Are you staring?
I just want to make sure what Thomas period is. I always forget.
On this.
54.
Before, really? Wasn't it wrong?
You gotta be a minute.
Oh, by the way, we're going to the library.
What is library? Isn't Elaine present though?
Huh?
Wasn't Elaine present? I was
Oh, yeah.
She's presented.
Is she here?
Yeah.
Okay, she'll present. Then we'll go.
No, good one, yeah.
So here's the French city. The French with the Paris was this medieval city, rickety roads all on top of each other. And there's still elements of that when you go there. Like, for example, you go to what's called the Jewish quarter. It's like mumbled up and jumbled. And then the rest of it are going to be these organized squares with streets radiating from them.
Like a sun.
Yeah. And so these dark ones are the main squares, and they cleared, just remove buildings to make these wide boulevards. And it was not just for traffic to go through, it was also narrow streets, easier for barricades.
Oh, so he took them down, but also put them back up.
Made it more difficult to do that. And so the Eiffel Tower, this is taken from the Eiffel Tower looking down.
Wait, you go up there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, know that.
You can take an elevator if you'd like to wait hours.
Yeah, you gotta
Or you can climb. Yeah, you have to climb on the outside. No, there's stairs. The only problem with the stairs are it's all open. You're open and you're at 50 stories and it's just, you're on these metal stairs. And if you're scared of heights at all, it's disconcerting.
Is there at least railing?
There's railing, but you look right down.
How
It's,
sturdy are those railings?
this is a good example of the Arc de Triomphe.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go down like the one street on, it would be the.
Chantilly's.
Down of that, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Finally.
German unification. So we had to get to Napoleon. So Napoleon has this kind of, I almost forgot one thing. Everybody write down one more thing for Napoleon. Napoleon tried to colonize Mexico at this time. He propped up a king, Maximilian, and tried to basically make it a puppet kingdom of Napoleon. And he could get away with this because the United States was in the middle of the Civil War. And eventually Mexico would kick him out, especially when Napoleon basically realized that this King Maximilian was never going to be popular in Mexico. Does anybody know the date where they kicked out the Austrian pretender propped in by
I was
Napoleon?
about to say Cinco de Mayo. Is it Cinco de Mayo?
Cinco de Mayo. Yeah.
I said, I think it's Cinco de Mayo, but like that's.
Now, in Mexico, that's not really celebrated. Yeah. Well, they do have a 5th of May in Mexico, but for some reason, in the United States, that is like a holiday. It's very weird for,
I was trying to think of a specific date. I was gonna be saying something like May 5th or something.
so it failed is the point. So German unification. And I should add, Germany is going to go through this whole range of these kind of Nordic, Germanic, mythical creatures. Kind of taking a little bit of Norse gods with German gods. They're going to make up a German mythology.
So kind of like the Germanic people from during like the Roman Empire.
Yeah, that's basically it. Coming up with their own unification myth. Well, we'll get to it. So we mentioned, I think we mentioned the Zoveran once before, didn't we? 1834.
Yeah.
So for 1848, this was going to be a free trade zone. And it's going to be dominated by Prussia, basically to get rid of tariff barriers between all these little Germanic states, so they can trade freely. So this is breaking down the borders of these kind of bickering little principalities and kingdoms and states. The biggest, of course, was Prussia, and Bavaria was the second biggest. Protestant, Catholic, other differences too, but breaking it down.
Was Russia Catholic?
They were Protestant, mostly Lutheran. And there was a big Prussian and Austrian rivalry for the old Germanic states. Austria kind of won after 1848. Prussia, humiliated by this, they wanted to dominate the new state or some kind of German empire or the German states, whatever might come out of this. So King Wilhelm I, he was.
Why is it pronounced with like a V instead of a W?
That's how you pronounce W's in German.
Oh, okay.
Wilhelm, we say, but it's William in English. English is a Germanic language. He was the king of Prussia. And he wasn't like all Prussian, like all monarchs. He was trying to be a soldier. He basically saw himself as a soldier. He was not a great statesman. He had power, but the big thing he did is he could appoint a chancellor. Yeah, those. But they were called sideburns yet.
Really?
What were they
No, we
called?
still got another decade.
What do they call it at this point? Like,
Not just whiskers, yeah.
Chop or something like that.
They wouldn't become sideburns till Ambrose Burnside. That started in the United States.
I do like how it's just like two side things, and then there's like a really noticeable division between the.
So the last thing for today, he picked essentially the executive, or their equivalent of a prime minister, close to it, like the chancellor is still, the so-called the chancellor today, and would be Otto von Bismarck. And Otto von Bismarck, a couple things about him. First off, he was a student of realpolitik, pragmatic. His only goal, this is what we have to get, realpolitik, anything to get Germany reunified. He would make enemies with former friends. He would say one thing, do another. It didn't matter. All that mattered is, in the end, he got German unification. And so, above Austria. So he fought Denmark with the help of the Austrians, and then 2 years later attacked the Austrians. And he very famously would say that all politics, all this talking, diplomacy, that doesn't matter. All that matters is a policy of blood and iron. Meaning, war and industry. Whoever has that will win. And thus will get the nickname the Iron Chancellor. And he would personify German unification, German pragmatism. I should add one more thing. Austria was a problem, but what country did he really hate? France. And on that happy note, tomorrow? Kangaroo soup.
When did they start calling the German leader Kaiser?
I did that now?
Yeah, like.
Well, we gotta wait till we get an empire.
Yeah, you're using Germany first.
Yeah. Once you get the German Empire, then they start calling them Kaiser. Everyone got the review list? Don't let me forget to give me hints on the short IDs.
Tell us hints on the short ID.
Thanks.
Hey, you could have forgotten it in 2 seconds.
Oh, want to see one very famous?
Item 4, things you can get done.
That's a good one. That is pretty clever.
I like how they're so different, but like they kind of do similar.
Tell you what, the Germans know their verse.
Didn't Bismarck actually get a battleship named after him?
World War II, yeah.
Bismarck?
The Bismarck. And its sister ship, the Turpitz.
I remember when I was younger, I always mispronounced it.
That was named after an admiral.
Purpose?
Mhm.
I always remember I get mispronounced this one.
Have a good day, everybody. One more presentation. That's awesome. You've had good, really good presentations. The myths will be fun too.
We just do a presentation.
Yeah, no paper.
What do you think we'll start?
I'd like to get them started as quickly as possible.
Get more time.
Yeah, we got to do a little, I got to do a little presentation on Ed Wood. Clear out of here. Let's look back. Carry on. This is anyone ever made sausage?
No. I feel like it'd be like hard now. I don't know.
Well, you know, like if you make it like I've made it, you just take pieces of meat, fat,
Stick it all together.
yeah, spices. But you know, think like blood sausage and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you ever heard like pudding? In Britain, they'll say like blood pudding or it's soft, that's
It's
soft.
just sausage. Okay. It's like.
Yeah. You're back!
Yeah.
What's up?
I'll email it to you.
Let's do it. And just say, email me or my friend Abby to sign it on me. Either one. Whatever's easiest. Yeah, blood pudding. It's just like a round black thing. It's blood sausage. But if you get, wherever you go in England, every place, you get, almost every place, as part of your inn or hotel, they give you an English breakfast. English breakfast is eggs, bacon, beans, usually mushrooms, toast, and blood pudding. Just this brown, hard thing. I had it. I ate it.
Sounds delicious.
No,
No,
it wasn't. It wasn't.
It was edible.
You was here earlier.
Probably the 100%.
Yeah, but you wasn't here, Gov. Yeah, he was.
What are you talking about? You think Doug?
I was gonna
He was in that thing, Gov.
Okay, we have one more presentation and then we are going to
The moon.
moon.
Like musical chairs ever since.
What are you doing? So, one more presentation, go to the moon. I think, is that it? We got everyone's presentation? Or Carlin, you stopped there.
Terry?
You went, didn't you?
Still not good now.
So you do have to go, yeah. Did you send it to me? Is it? I was gonna say, yeah, wait, we had Carlin soon, she went around. Where were you?
On
Sit around the fire, listen. Otto von Bismarck.
35 calories?
Well, yeah, he definitely. Yes, you like Phoenix?
Look at my right. Wow, you slowed down. I saw that. You're young and sweet.
I got macros, I go with 2 grand. Well, we gotta get 2 grand and try to hit like 130.
Sorry, we aren't gonna, we'll go to the library after our last presentation. So we have 2 left. Did you send them to me? So, first one is first.
Oh, we're recording. That's good.